Hello and welcome to Comedy in a Nutshell. My name is Mark Decano and I host thecomedynerd.com, a website which charts the more than 40 years I've been seeing over 1,300 different comedians perform live comedy. And in this podcast I get to talk to a few of them and ask them about their experiences in comedy and find out, does comedy mean the same to them as it means to me? I love talking to the people in comedy about comedy. If you'd like to hear what they have to say as much as I do, then please like, subscribe, rate, review and share the podcast. Thank you. My guest this episode is an author and comedian whose debut stand-up hour I was fortunate enough to see at the 2023 Edinburgh Festival Fringe, and he's been described variously as affable, charming and impressive. It's stand-up comedian Richard Cobb.
Hello mate, how you doing?
Hi, good, how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks.
So yeah, I mean, if you're happy we can just crack straight on.
Yeah, good to go.
So tell me, first and foremost, was comedy like a big thing growing up? Did it get introduced to you early?
I think so. I think like it had been from an enjoyment point of view anyway. I think it was I don't know, like probably like Saturday night TV, and it was stuff like kind of Jack D from kind of like a young age, which is probably where I got my sort of dry unenthusiastic humor from, I guess. So that was probably what started it off. But then I kind of think I don't know. I think there's probably a lot of it was sort of subconscious as well through kind of like TV shows, and then it just sort of grew from there really. But it's I don't quite know. I feel like it kind of things that I think things almost led to comedy. Like it wasn't like I guess like a natural path. I think there was a few things that sort of, I guess, led to the comedy thing really.
So what was your original pathway? What direction did you anticipate going in before comedy took over?
I guess music was sort of primarily my my idea was to just be like do the whole like band thing and then just be like a touring musician.
Yeah.
And like I started off, it was very much like even when I was really young, I guess like 5 or 6, I had a band called the Moonshakers, and it was we like there was like 3 of us, and then I used to like write all the track names and do like the album art, and then make little kind of tapes. We've never actually made any music. It was just just used to really like kind of creating it, and then having this idea that I was in this band, and then it was I guess I kind of missed the boat with it in high school a little bit. There was like friends were kind of going into bands, and I always had this idea like, oh, I really want to join a band, but I could never really be bothered to like fully learn like guitar until I was maybe like last year of school. So then that didn't really happen. But then I guess from there that kind of started off with sort of doing solo stuff when I was at like university and college.
Yeah.
So I didn't really enjoy the kind of the acoustic music that much, but because it was like one guy and a guitar, that was really my only way of kind of performing, I guess. So I was kind of trying to do like the band stuff, so kind of doing like being on bills with like guitar bands, but then opening up for like 15 minutes doing kind of, I don't know, Coldplay covers or something. So it was kind of not quite the rock and roll lifestyle that I thought. But then I guess it was only like 8 or 9 years ago, I think I started, like a friend of mine's band were looking for a bassist, so I hadn't played bass before, but then I learned over like, I think I took 2 weeks off over a summer holiday at work, and then kind of learned how to just about get away with playing bass, and then that was kind of the open door, I guess, for kind of, I went to join another band, and that worked out well, but then I feel it was quite limited, just in the sense that I had big ideas, but I never quite knew how to turn that into a successful career, I guess.
What was it that made you want to turn your hand to comedy?
I say that like comedy is like a raging success for me as well. When it's, to be honest, I probably was doing better at music, but I feel like with the comedy, I think that sort of started when I think like I'd been at school and stuff. I was always like cracking really rubbish jokes and like irritatingly bad jokes, which I'd probably kill for now, to be honest. Just that level of like people sighing but still sort of laughing. And I feel like I moved to Australia. So basically, my now wife had gone out to Australia in 2015, and I stayed back, and like I was still living up in Edinburgh at the time, so I stayed to try and like give it one last sort of crack with a band essentially.
Mm.
And I feel like the turning point of when I decided to go out to Australia was we were doing a show in Berwick upon Tweed,
Hmm.
and my idea was to sort of stream it online, and then we try and get like get people to tune in. And I think we had two people tuning in, and the first one was like my wife in Australia had tuned in, and then there was like a small child had tuned in, I think by mistake, to the wrong channel. And remember her saying to me afterwards, like, "Oh, I really wish I was there." And I was like, "It's a pouring night in Berwick upon Tweed, and she's in Sydney, so yeah, we didn't quite make it there." So I think from there, like, I'd gone out, and to be honest, it was a bit of a weird route. So I started writing like I guess recalling the adventure of being in Australia,
Mm.
and without really a thought behind it, I just sort of started kind of sort of stream of consciousness, really just writing stuff down in my iPhone notes,
Yeah.
and then that became a an idea I had to, because like one of my favorite films is Big Fish, and I love like the idea, like the relationship between the father and the son, and how it's like the stories kind of live on. So I kind of thought, again, maybe ideas of my station, I thought like it would be great if I could kind of share these stories. So I
Mm.
think I kind of worked from Australia backwards a little bit, and then went back to sort of stories from school, and just that opened up kind of like I guess a can of worms of memories. So I think from there I kind of crafted a writing style which was kind of like I was trying to make it funny and engaging, but
Mm.
also I guess an open route for people that didn't really read very much, because the idea was I wasn't really ever going to get anything published. But then I think as the ideas grew and I kept writing, I thought I'll self publish
Hmm.
these books, and then I think from there it became a point of going to like book readings and trying to kind of read them out. But it was in between like really depressing poetry, so there'd be people like giving their like life stories and like poetry, like really sad and emotional, and I'd come up and tell like a story about the time that I was like sick on a ferry in France when I was 7, like something like ridiculous. And it was good fun, but it was also like I felt like the way I was delivering it, I wasn't even fully reading what was on the page. I was kind of, I guess, feeding off the audience a little bit. So then I thought, well, if that's worked, then maybe it could be a route to doing stand up, I guess.
Yeah. So your first book, part one, The Easiest to Digest Years, that was 2019, is that right?
Yeah, 2019. So I think, yeah, that was the first one. So it was, to be honest, like I called it part one without really knowing that I would have carried it on and quite as quickly as that. But I feel that
Mm.
that was so that was kind of the ages of, I think, sort of 5 to 18,
Yeah.
of just essentially just like a walkthrough of, yeah, differences between sort of like family holidays.
Yeah.
There was chat about kind of school stuff that went on, and to be honest, there was bits that were probably like all of it happened, but there was bits that I probably like my memories have probably just been like make this sound like a lot worse than it was, just for the sense of obviously kind of creating the kind of narrative, I guess. But
Yeah. So similarly to when if you're doing stand up, because you are a storyteller, I think that's fair to say as a stand up.
yeah,
But do you alter the story to fit jokes that you have in mind, or do the jokes come first and you change the narrative to meet the jokes, or do the jokes come from things you've remembered from the story?
it kind of, well, I mean, I didn't used to, I think there was maybe one or two stories that I kind of lifted on. So,
Mm.
I mean, I started, apart from I had like one show maybe when I was at college, like a stand-up show, which was an open mic, and it was dreadful because I was sort of pounding the ciders before I went on, and it was that sort of like awful experience of just like a bet with a flatmate essentially. So that kind of,
Mm.
from there I was like a horrendous experience, and I thought never doing that again. But then I feel when I started so I kind of started stand up, like again plagued by timing. I think I had three before, I think maybe February 2020,
Hmm.
and from there, like they weren't really leaning that much on the book stuff. I think I'd written a few, just because I mean the stage time was like 5 minutes, so I didn't
Mm.
really think I could kind of, like, I guess now I have kind of longer form stories, whereas back then it was sort of try and write as much as I can, just unrelated, and I didn't even really think to kind of lean on the stuff I'd already written. So that kind of helped when kind of mapping out longer shows. I was realizing I was like, well, got these big chapters, and I think it made it easier. So some maybe sort of 5 or 10 minute shows I kind of like take a little bit of the story, but then kind of chop the best bits. But then I kind of learned that as I was going.
Mm.
But then I feel like a lot of it was, I feel more with stand up that I've got more like leeway of kind of adding different elements to it. I felt like the
Yeah.
stuff in the book was very kind of like this basically happened. There was a few bits I've maybe over egged,
Yeah.
but it was almost kind of wanting to sort of stay true to it. Whereas I've kind of gradually learned that like it's better to add like more relatable hooks in there as well, just that can kind of otherwise like people are just gonna think it's really weird.
So, like you say, only a few gigs before February 2020. So,
Yeah.
what happened next for you in terms of writing and performing through lockdowns?
I mean, I finished my, I guess I finished my other book, so I guess it's four now that I've written.
Hmm.
But then I think that kind of led to just like a long time of just thinking, well, I should probably get this done. And to be honest, I think from that book, there's a lot that kind of lent itself to, I think because I'd already sort of done comedy at that point, like I hadn't really done comedy properly before the first book, whereas I had that kind of idea, like, well, I could maybe adapt this uh, into sort of stand up at some point. But I
Mm.
feel like it was, I mean, I guess primarily like I started like the reason for sort of picking up the gigs again was just because I'd like moved down with my wife. I think we sort of November, December 2019. I think we came down to London from Edinburgh.
Hmm.
And then it was effectively like getting to the point of sort of in your 30s, and it's really hard to make friends and kind of like know like anybody down here. So like my sister had lived in London. She lives down in Sussex now, so she was about the only person we knew down here.
Right.
So it was kind of a case. I put myself on the deep end and just thinking if I go and do the comedy scene, then it's a way of kind of building up the confidence a little bit, and it's a way of kind of meeting a whole different community of people.
Mm.
So I guess that was the idea, and then obviously by 3 gigs in, it was kind of out the window. So it was, I don't know, it was quite awkward. But I feel like my last gig before lockdown was like with like Ali Woods was doing the show at Vauxhall, which I think Big Belly
Hmm.
Comedy Club it's called now. And him and Tom Elwes had a night, and I was on there, and it went really well. So I feel like if it had been a bad show before lockdown, it probably wouldn't have. It would have scared me off for life, I think. So I think the fact that went well kind of got me thinking. Well, like I wasn't really at the point of doing comedy that I needed to sort of do any of the car park gigs or do Zoom gigs,
Right.
just because I didn't really feel like, yeah, I mean, that there wasn't really that itch to scratch, I guess. I didn't feel like I needed to sort of keep practicing. It's like, as far as I knew, it was like, well, it's something I've done. I can pick it up
Right.
again when normality resumes. So
Yeah.
also, I think it would have been dreadful. Like, I think it was hard enough for people that were like seasoned comics doing that. And I used to watch like they did the stand, like Mark Nelson presented the stand comedy
Yeah.
club stuff on I think a Saturday, and I found that really interesting, seeing like getting a bit of an idea of how comedians could perform in like an empty room, obviously online,
Mm.
and I think that was really inspiring, just because you could kind of see the like you could sort of see the sadness in some people's eyes, but you could also see like the kind of like the lengths they would go to really just to kind of keep that alive and then keep people laughing at home when everybody was sad. So
Yeah.
I think like yeah, that was really I guess that kind of kept the fire going really throughout lockdown, just to thinking when that's done,
Yeah.
I'll maybe pick it up again.
And when you did eventually then pick it up again, how was it different from when you did it the first few times?
I think I felt a bit more confident with it. So I guess like I didn't really have. I mean, I was really nervous. I think like the first one back, I was nervous just because it was a sense like for me, it was more how am I going to remember all this rather than the fact I'm actually performing it. I'm just like the stress for me is looking like I'm not being stressed. So I
Yeah.
guess like that's maybe something I learned from doing music, of the sense of like unless like if you look stressed, then people are going to see right through it, and it's not going to be enjoyable for anybody watching. So I feel like
Mm.
if I manage to kind of fool myself into thinking that is fine, then it'll make for a better watch. But then definitely before, I think I went back and did like comedy virgins at the Cavendish,
Hmm.
and that was Yeah, that was quite stressful, just from the sense of because it was all new, so it was stuff I hadn't said before, and it's kind of that sort of thing of like it's funny in my head. Is this going to be funny to
Mm.
anybody else there? But yeah, no, it was a real buzz after that one, really, and I think from then it just sort of just kept the gigs going ever since, effectively.
Yeah. You've mentioned about confidence a couple of times, and there just now about the stress. Do you get nerves or do you get anxious before going on stage?
I don't really like stand it. I think I deliberately don't have any like I don't drink or anything before
Mm.
shows now. I feel like it's I think the concern of that is just because it's I need to be sort of match sharp. So I think with that there needs to be there's like a degree of nervousness, I guess. Like I
Mm.
feel like I had a hometown show last Christmas, and that was like my first sort of headline show. So that was like the local village, like where my parents live, the Scottish borders. It was like I think
Mm.
60 or 70 people, and that was like the first time I was going to attempt. Well, I don't know how long I was going to attempt, but it was going to be my work in progress,
Hmm.
which became this year's Fringe show.
Yeah.
So I think I build it as anywhere between 20 minutes and an hour because I had no way of knowing like if it was going badly I was gonna get out of there. But I was quite nervous just because I put the whole like I booked the hall. I got a couple of friends down,
Hmm.
Angus Coots and Chelsea Young from I think Chelsea was up in Dundee, but Angus is from Edinburgh, so I kind of got them
Hmm.
down the road and sort of thought if this is bad, it's the Scottish comedy scene is probably going to hear about it. So it was that was a bit of stress, but then also just because my mum and dad were there and like
Yeah.
all of their neighbours, and it's a very small kind of Truman Show type community of like it's weird when you like living in London for a while, then you go back up and walking the dog, and then people say hi to you when you're walking the dog, and you're sort of like, that's weird because in London, if you say that, it's frowned upon. So it was
Yeah, you're not allowed to talk to anyone in London.
I know it was yeah. I mean, from that, it felt like a lot of responsibility, and I guess that trickled into the Fringe show
Mm.
this year as well. It was stressful, but again, it was just because I just didn't know how I was going to keep anyone interested for an hour. Which I mean, depending on who you ask, maybe I didn't. But it was, I think after enough of them, yeah, it became sort of routine that that I was kind of not really nervous about it.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your Fringe show then, Couples Massage.
Hmm.
So again, it's delivered in your storytelling style. How did you work up to an hour? What did you expect was what you were going to be taking to the festival?
Uh, I mean, at the start, like I kind of ran this past one of my friends. I gave an idea, so I started writing the show on the plane back from my honeymoon last October. And just because it was like a long flight, I think that my wife had been asleep and I was just sort of yeah, just again writing nonsense on my phone. And I just had this idea of just like it was almost like it started a year of challenges, which was just like, well, that's going to put me under a lot of stress. I might do that. I'll see what happens. And that tends to be the way that I work best. I think like even this year it was or like sorry, like the end of last year was a case of like maybe I'll run a marathon one day. I'll see how that goes, and then that's going to be into my next Fringe show. And I always feel like I'm subconsciously just doing stressful things just so I can talk about them on stage. But I think to be honest, it was just one of them. I think going back to like uh, I'd mentioned maybe it was off the recording actually. Like David Ian, one of my friends from comedy. I saw him
Yeah.
do his debut Fringe Hour, Mediocre Gay. That was in I think Camden Fringe in August 2022.
Hmm.
And then I think he'd maybe done sort of 50 or 60 gigs and then just like batted out an hour. And it was like an incredible hour. It was like one of the best things I'd seen, like from having gone up and like, I used to like review up in Edinburgh for a couple of years and it
Yeah.
just seemed so natural. And I was a bit like, well, that like, how's he done that? Like, what's going on there? And he just sort of said, just sort of, well, it's you might as well. There's that many people like almost that are kind of saying, oh, you need to like perfect it. You need to like be able to go up if you've done like a couple hundred shows.
Mm.
And it was almost just like, well, if you've got something to say, like why not? And I think the basis I was forming that off was I saw like a one man Edgar Allan Poe
Hmm.
adaptation of The Raven one year up in Edinburgh, and it was comfortably the worst thing I've ever seen at the festival. And that guy came over from Boston for it, so he had enough sort of confidence to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure maybe people in that circle would have enjoyed it. But I just thought, well, Edinburgh's my home. So just thought, if I can go up, if I can kind of roughly cobble something together, then again, if I set myself a deadline of like if I book the venue, if I get my train ticket, if I get the accommodation sorted at my sister's, then there's my like I need to do it. So it's just very much a case of like panic, right? And I think to be honest, a lot of it helped because I had already written stuff in the book, so it was quite a case of joining the dots and adding quite a lot of that stuff in. But then it also meant there was a lot of kind of editing, like the first maybe week or 10 days of the festival. A lot of stuff got chucked, just because it was I hadn't had that many hours. So like it's hard in London. I guess that's maybe what a lot of people say of just getting that sort of stage time of kind of building up. So I'd been used to kind of doing 5 or 10 minute shows, maybe 15 if I was lucky. And it was very much a case of like, how am I going to get an hour out of this? So that's why I did things like I went home and did like the hometown show, and I did another one in May, and it was just a case of kind of doing them on your own terms because it was just that hard to get that in London.
I mean, you say you made some big changes to the show. How much did it change from the start of the festival to the end of the festival?
I think it definitely. I mean, I made a big change on, I think, the first Saturday. So I think the first show was like Thursday, maybe. And I think 2 days in, I realized that the show was called Couples Massage and it was meant to center around the massage. And then I realized I didn't actually mention the massage until about 10 minutes before the end, which was, on reflection, I was just thinking, well, like, nobody's really complained about it. But I was also like, well, I've sort of lured them into the idea that the show was going to be about that. I thought, well, basically, what I just sort of shifted it a little bit of, I just sort of made a lot of the stuff I'd already mentioned. I kind of put it under the umbrella of taking place at the massage. So it was kind of, it was quite easy to do, but it was also quite terrifying that I'd sort of decided on like the bus on the way to the Saturday night show, which was like the first sellout of the show, that I was going to completely change it. So I was a little bit panicking, but I think it definitely was for the better, and I feel like it was one of them. If you can kind of identify a change, like because it could have gone badly, and then I would have reverted sort of to type. But I think because it gone well, it was kind of a case of right, well, that kind of helped a lot of other things like refining bits, maybe taking parts out, just sort of like I think it was just from time, like because I found myself at the point of having to sort of rush through a lot of stuff, and then I just thought, well, there's little bits in the middle which are okay, which are fairly amusing, but like they just take too long. And I thought if I'm at the point where I can like look down and I've got like 2 minutes left of stage time and I've not got to my ending yet, then it's not fair in the next act sort of thing. So I just thought slice it and then I can just have a bit more breathing space.
Yeah. How was your festival experience as a whole, as someone doing their first hour?
I think it was amazing. I think like I'm under no illusions that I found it amazing because I've got family up there, and I think I'm reading a lot just now, obviously, about even people looking next year for accommodation and how like complete eye-watering costs of like a couple £1,000 to stay at like a student halls, with like 4 other people, and it just sounds like horrendous. I think even like I did a show. Like the first time I'd been up to do shows in Edinburgh the year before, I had like 2 10-minute spots or something. And one of the guys was sleeping in a tent, like down by Arthur's Seat for like, or he was going to do it for the whole festival. I think he maybe managed like a week or something, and then he got an Airbnb somewhere. But it's like the commitment people put in, and I think that would have been a real stress. And I think even as much as the fact it was free festival really helped as well, because I was at the point where I'd looked at like another one of the venues I'd got an offer, the first one that came through, and it's going to be like 2.5 grand, I think, for like a 50-seater, which to be honest, maybe isn't bad by comparison, but I just thought I was trying to work out the numbers, and I thought I'm going to need 35, 40 people every single night of the festival to see any of that back effectively, and I just thought I didn't really want to risk it. I kind of felt it was like it takes a lot off the performance, and I think because there was that stress of doing the first hour, then I think if you add the fact if you're firing, if you're trying to make like the money back as well, then
Yeah.
I feel like that it changes from the kind of laid back approach, so you can just see the kind of fear in someone's eyes, or the kind of I could feel that if it was at the point where I had like, I don't know, pay what you want bucket at the end, I would almost be like looking into people's souls. I feel like if I was like relying on kind of seeing any of that money back, whereas I think because I mean like my overheads, I guess like I think from that point of view, I had like I went up and did Morecambe like before, so I rented a car, which was terrifying, and driving out of London for the first time. So I took like my wife and her dog, and it was terrifying initially because I realized as soon as I got the car, it was an automatic, and I'm not used to driving automatics. And then I signed a paperwork thing to say no dogs in the car, and I was like, well, I've got my dog. He's literally on the fringe posters. And then it was hitting the M25, and then like lots of like I accidentally went into park on the M25 in the fast lane, and then like lots of stresses. So I kind of felt like that I got my stress out of the way before
Yeah.
before Edinburgh really. But yeah, no, I feel like it was I kind of I think looking back, I probably could have I mean done a bit more networking and maybe hung out with people more. But I feel like after my shows, I was very much a case of right, probably get the bus home, like listen back to bits of my set I wasn't sure about, and then kind of get lots of sleep and then go like do it the next day, because I felt like I was at the point where I just needed to analyze absolutely every part of the performance
Hmm.
in order to get to the point maybe week two or like halfway through week two that I thought I'm actually quite calm about this now. But then it was very much a case of like I was analyzing absolutely everything.
Yeah.
I think as well about what was great about Edinburgh was like I'm always pretty hard on myself if I've had a bad show. Like I analyze every aspect of like, oh, what that's gone badly. What could I have done there?
Yeah.
And I was just really interested about Edinburgh, just the fact of like you've got 23 shows, you basically can't sit on the fact that you've had a bad one the night before, and you've just got to make sure the next one's good. So I was interested about that whole like almost like the disposable show
Hmm.
type thing, just in thinking, well, like if I'm like a weekend and every show's bombed, then I'd be like I'm in trouble. Whereas I think like it was definitely helpful that I could try and kind of improve it for the following night.
Yeah. What about other performers? While you're spending the month there with your show every night, are you going out and seeing other shows as well? Are you going to see comedy, or are you avoiding seeing comedians so that you don't compare yourself and your show?
Well, I didn't for the first week or 10 days, but that was
Mm.
primarily just because like I've been in shows when I guess it reminded me of like if you go to a show, maybe like an open mic in London, and there's sort of 15. I'm aware I'm like slagging off London a lot here, but I think it's just because I live here and do the shows, so it's not intentional. But just from my experience of stand up in London, it's if you do sort of 15 or 20 act lineups,
Mm.
and maybe it'll just be acts in the room, then you'll be looking out and there'll be people sort of stressing, looking over lines, maybe reading their hands
Mm.
on their phone. And I didn't like my concern was I was so absorbed with like how my show was going that I kind of thought I needed like I'd be a rubbish audience member, so I like deliberately didn't go and see any shows for the first sort of week or 10 days just because I wasn't comfortable enough maybe with my own show
Right.
that I thought I don't want to go and like kind of be a downer on anybody else's. But I definitely like I caught up a lot. I think I tried to kind of most nights go and see somebody afterwards or maybe like during the day before. So I guess like I think that started off like I saw Crystal Evans who's got a show
Hmm.
and her show was incredible. I think I saw that
Yeah.
preview in London
Hmm.
somewhere, and I think that was amazing. And I think that was like I thought about that for ages afterwards. I didn't see it again in Edinburgh, but that was a brilliant show. I saw Liam Withnail, his show was really well thought of as well. And yeah, there's so much, and I think particularly it struck me that like just a lot of the talent coming from Scotland, because I feel like it was maybe sort of overlooked for the awards and stuff. I think obviously the people that were up for the awards were definitely deserving, but I think there was such a strong year coming out of
Mm.
of Edinburgh and Glasgow and stuff that it was kind of yeah, like almost everybody I went to see was incredible, basically.
When you're watching other comedians, do you watch them as a comedian? Are you analytical? Are you looking at the mechanics of it, or are you able to watch it and enjoy it like an audience member?
I think I can enjoy it. So I think it's maybe afterwards that I maybe think more
Right.
about it, because I knew that like it's very different to like when I used to like review comedy, which I found very hard because I used to review music as well,
Hmm.
and that was fine because I could take notes throughout. And it was like the first, I think the first one I reviewed, I think I reviewed like Brett Goldstein or something. I had no idea how to review comedy because I was like, well, I can't remember any of what I've seen. Like, even if I'm an audience member, I can't like I can maybe remember one or two punchlines from my show. I just remember I enjoyed it,
Yeah.
and so I was almost like afterwards, like just having to use a lot of filler sentences here. So it was kind of yeah, that was quite hard, and it was like I feel like with music, it was very much a case of it'd be like, right, oh, and then the lights were doing this, or like, and then you know, the act like blah blah blah. Whereas I felt with comedy, it's a lot easier. So I feel like I kind of, even if I'm not out seeing comedy, I like there's so many like amazing specials on YouTube that I'll kind of try and
Mm.
sort of like one or two a week at the moment, just sort of getting through them, and then I think just enjoying them for what they are. Really, I think it's like I think I'm quite lucky in the sense that I don't really think I that there's any comedians that I almost try to be like, if that makes sense. I think
Mm.
it's and I don't know if that's me having found a voice, or it's just because again I find like a lot of maybe the humor comes from my awkward situations. So I feel like it's quite hard to kind of script that, I guess. But I feel like watching other comedians is almost it's great to see the reaction they're getting, and it's great to see a lot of their stuff, and it just gives me a bit of a buzz rather than thinking like, oh, they could have done that better and something. But
Yeah.
I don't know why. Maybe after this I will view it differently. I don't know, but I hadn't before.
Yeah. So you talked there a little bit about not being like other comedians, but are there other comedians now, or have there been comedians that you've seen growing up that inspired you or that continue to inspire you?
Yeah, I think primarily it was probably Russell Kane actually. I think
Hmm.
when he'd like I went sort of by chance in 2008, I think,
Yeah.
and I saw him at the Fringe in like a tiny room at the Pleasance, which I don't think is there anymore, and almost became like the kind of regular sort of every year at the Fringe. So I've probably seen him about 10 times now, and I think it was just that I think that energy. Like I remember like there's been stuff in like you can tell the comedians are influenced by this sort of the frantic sort of 8 espressos sort of prancing
Yeah.
like up and down the stage kind of thing. So it's almost I find that really interesting, but I think I'm probably too unfit to be able to sort of to copy that. But I feel like that was definitely just from the point I think he had like his 2010 show, Smoke Screens and Castles, which he won the comedy award that year for it, and I think I saw it about 3 times that year,
Mm.
and it was just I think that started the whole like the I mean I don't want to call it a dead dad show, but that started
Yeah.
the whole like kind of
The sad
I
bit.
guess yeah the sad part towards the end, and it was
Yeah.
very much like gut punch, and it was kind of I know like some maybe critics had opinions on that, and it maybe paved the way for that type of show, but I hadn't seen anything like it before to that kind of
Mm.
paved the way for a lot of how kind of comedy became. But I feel on that as well, like I'd like people like Nick Helm I'd go and see all the time as well. He had some amazing shows. I think One Man Megamyth I'd seen back in the day, and that was just like the whole thing. It was almost like an Evil Knievel type show, and he'd blend it with music and shouting, and it was just I felt very uneasy being in the crowd for these gigs. But he's obviously like the nicest guy in comedy, and I think that was this whole thing that is just like very angry on stage. But I feel like those two. I mean, for me, I think they were like very much kind of continuous, I guess, throughout. But I think even like more so, I think there's a lot of like comedy I listen to in like podcasts with people nowadays. So like Some Laugh podcast with Mark
Hmm.
Jennings, Stuart McPherson, and Stephen Buchanan. I listen to that weekly, and enjoy an album with again Liam Withnail and Christopher MacArthur Boyd. I think those are like great listens just every week. I think they get sort of special guests on, and I think it's just a nice accompaniment. I think it kind of
Mm.
like I think just make like even if you're like going out a run or if you're on the commute and stuff, it's really light-hearted, and I think it's good that there's that kind of continuous sort of um being sort of continuously being fed sort of comedy. I think it kind of keeps the brain working it as well.
Yeah. What about feedback in the form of reviews, particularly as someone who's written reviews?
Um, I got a, I got a 3-star review in. I mean, primarily I found reviews really hard to come by, and I think that started with. I think there's a lot about needing kind of putting money aside for PR and stuff like
Mm,
that, which
yeah.
wasn't a position I was wanting to put myself in. I think it was one of them. I think I moved the goalposts a little bit because I thought at the start of the run, I think I just wanted I didn't want any press to come just because I thought this was going to get eaten alive. I thought it's going to go badly. I think if it's because I'm the sort of person that like if somebody asked me, I'd be like, I don't Google my name or like I wouldn't check reviews, but I would 100%
Yeah.
like I've checked them and I think the first one I got was when I did Morecambe. I thought like I've absolutely smashed that. It's and I was like reading up on the local, I think the Lancaster Guardian, and they were like throwing out 5 stars like nobody's business. So I thought that's going straight on the poster, like outside the City Cafe, gonna chuck 5 stars up there. And I got like a 3-star, which I was like, and it read and it said, by the end of the Fringe, if it it could well be a 4-star show. And I thought that's nice, but I'm not like it's still a 3, just not something like
Yeah.
it was kind of like it's a 3-star isn't bad as much as I'd uh try and tell Brett Goldstein that after I gave him 3 stars in Edinburgh. But I feel like to me, I was a bit like, well, I kind of I want kind of quotes because that's the sort of thing. If like after the festival, if I'm kind of applying for anywhere, I want to be able to sort of show that off. And the only review I got uh, from a publication was not a publication I'd heard of. I think it was like a husband and wife blog. Really nice review, 2 stars. So I was like, gone from 3 stars before Edinburgh to halfway through, and I think it's a better show, and I got 2. So not great, but I think from I think I found like audience reviews were like a lot of them were really positive, and I think that's the ones I'd heard of anyway. But I say a lot, like 3 or 4 people said they enjoyed it. But I think for me that was like it was really good just to sort of like I think even like some people came back to the show, which was I think like the biggest thing for me because it's sort of like I've had that after gigs where I've been like, oh, great performance, mate, but then it's quite generic. Whereas I think when you actually see somebody coming back to the show,
Mm.
not under duress, it was I think that was the best thing for me really. But yeah, again, I feel like as soon as I thought maybe I'd want reviews for this, it was kind of I was too it was too late in the process, I feel. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I saw something in which you were described as a gentle storyteller. Is that a description you would agree with? Are you mindful of what your persona is on stage?
I think it's become that. I think I used to, like I've done some I mean I don't think it's intentional. I feel like any sort of offense that gets thrown out is largely at my own direction. So I kind of feel I try to sort of make it a bit of a not uneasy on the audience really, just because I think there's that many that like are a lot better at making people feel uneasy and stuff like. And I think like I anytime I do something like that, I'll feel probably guilt afterwards, and I'm like, ugh, I'm not that.
Hmm.
I guess I'm not that sort unless it's like off the cuff thing. So I kind of felt like it became maybe I don't know. I feel like it's probably come to the point where it's maybe gentle storytelling, but I don't know if that's just like again leaning on the fact that sort of almost quite unenthusiastic delivery again maybe to the attributing to the Jack D stuff
Yeah.
from an early age, but I'm not quite sure. But I don't mind it. I think when after the Cadrona show that I did in the like last Christmas, the Scottish Border show, my mom said, "You could really, I mean, you could be the next Michael McIntyre," which I didn't really know how to take. So I was like, maybe not that nice, but yeah.
Where you've got like Jack D there, who's like the miserable guy.
Mhm.
I've spoken with Alex Farrow, who's the philosophy guy, Dave Chorner, who's the mental health guy. Are you the gentle guy? Is that an epithet that you'd be comfortable with?
I mean, I don't. I think it kind of. I think there. Sometimes what I feel like, I think it's the. I like kind of sort of like I don't know, maybe sort of bringing stuff out the blue. I feel like it was like stuff like um. I'm trying to base this on like the film like Grand Budapest Hotel. I think there was like one use of like the F words
Yeah.
towards the end, or like, and I really like when it's sort of out the blue and effectively used. So like, and I kind of feel like there's a few bits in the show that I felt like
Hmm.
I almost like kind of pulling the rug a little bit of that sort of like, oh, this is all fine, but then it'll be like, I think there was maybe bits in like in the couples massage show this year that it was a bit kind of like you could almost see like the kind of, I think like one of my friends described it to me. They said that you could almost see like the gradually getting more and more like annoyed, but still trying to sort of put a nice face on. And then at the end, it
Yeah.
was just like bang, like
Yeah.
that, like firework off. So I kind of like that idea of, it's all going fine, but then having that level of unpredictability. Like I don't feel like, I think with my books, I think they're not like the material there. It's not probably all family friendly. I know like it, there was a lot of references to the language used kind of throughout and stuff. And I think that was just sort of how I sort of am. So I think it was kind of to that point. But I think a lot of it's maybe it was just the theme of this year's show as well, that it was a lot of sort of self-reflection. So I think it was kind of trying to be mindful about that. And I think that's just I do a lot of sort of inwards reflecting really. But
Mm.
I don't know, next year's show, I feel like uh what I've got in mind is it would completely shatter the idea that I'm a nice comedian or a nice guy. I feel like it's I'm already there's a lot of red tape I've had to get signed off. And that's I haven't even fully started writing it yet. It was just the idea that yeah, it could definitely dispel that, I think.
Yeah. You've talked a little bit there earlier on about differences between London and Scotland and the borders. How is comedy different in those two areas for you, either watching or performing?
I think I need to, or I don't know if I need to, but I feel I definitely make more of the fact that I probably make more of a Braveheart of it down here. I feel than like, I don't know, I can easily chop the material. Like a lot of it's, I think maybe a lot of people in similar position would say this, that they kind of need to uh reference the accent to like if you're down here, just because it'll like somebody could pick up on it or something like that. So it's almost good to sort of get that out of the way.
Mm.
Whereas when sort of back in Scotland, it's you're like everyone else. So I almost kind of use it as like, oh, these guys in London, like and they've got this problem with my accent and stuff. So I kind of like, yeah, I kind of turn it on its head. But I think like I'm to be honest, I don't think my accent's that even that like from that point of view, I don't think it's that strong. So I think like other, it's not like a Kevin Bridges type thing. Whereas I feel like he's like that would be a lot more of a thing. But I think I don't know. I think from the scene, I find the scene hard down here, but I don't really have much to compare it to. So I
Right.
think like going up and doing, maybe because it's smaller in like Edinburgh and Glasgow and stuff, and I think it's a bit easier to get on decent gigs. I think that it's very like it's, I don't know, secret handshakes a little bit, or it feels like that maybe sometimes of kind of knowing how to sort of get on particular shows, which I feel is can be quite demoralizing. Whereas I feel if kind of going back up to Scotland, you can kind of like you can do your kind of monkey barrels and stuff like that. I was
Yeah.
going to say you can do the stand, but they've not booked me yet, so you can go up and do you can go up and do them fairly easily if you know people. Whereas it's a bit, I feel it's very um competitive and cluttered down here, I guess.
Yeah. At the Fringe, you've got 3,500 shows to compete against for an audience. About six, 700 of them are comedy shows, most of which is stand-up.
Yeah.
Are you competitive in nature? How do you feel yourself competing against others for an audience?
I think I mean, yeah, next year's show is all about being extremely competitive to the point that I once like locked my mum in the summer house at my sister's when we were doing like an egg hunt after a couple of wines. And yeah, it was only when she said she was extremely claustrophobic I had to sort of let her out. And she still won unknowingly, but I feel like I don't know, I find it hard because I hate by nature, like I'm very like sort of yeah, self-reflective, I guess, and it's I get annoyed when I find myself competitive, but I feel like it's maybe not so much in Edinburgh, but I feel down here I get quite like that's what I don't really do gong shows, or I don't really do competitions anymore, just because
Mm.
I'd not done well at them at the start. I think like a couple of years ago, and I just from my point of it, I'm not a nice person at these kind of things. I'm just like, and I'm so like, as much as I'm sort of, I want to be like, oh, that's great, congratulations and stuff. I'm like the worst, but like, if it's not gone well for me and somebody else has done well, I'll probably leave. I'll just be like, that's annoying, and just like, give my wife like an earful about how I didn't agree with the decision and stuff like that. So I think from that point of view, I think it's hard because I don't think by nature sort of comedy should be competitive. I think it's easy to sort of, I guess, look around and see like I don't know, and I find it really hard on like Instagram and seeing people getting
Yeah.
certain shows, and like it's that kind of balance of like feeling kind of uh pleased for them, but also thinking like how are they getting that? You know, and it's just by nature. It's a lot of it's like I don't really like bad mouthing anybody, but a lot of it's just in my head of like, what have they done? But then
Mm.
also considering a lot of these people are gigging like 7, 8 times a week, whereas I'm maybe gigging twice in a good week.
Yeah.
So you know, it's a lot of that's kind of like not really reading between the lines of kind of the downfall, I guess. But I
Mm.
think in Edinburgh, like I struggled a little bit because it was I mean I was helped because my room was only like a 20-25 capacity, but I printed like 5,000 flyers and I think I handed out about 100 at most. Most of them ended up in my sister's like recycling bin, and I just found I was so like particularly I went up to the Royal Mile to flyer and there was like a I think like Viking wrestling. They were always like they were outside the Starbucks on the like really great flyering, like a whole team of them.
Yeah.
And like I didn't want to pay anyone to flyer for me because like 20 capacity. I thought it's like it's not gonna make a big difference if I'm paying somebody £15. That's like I don't know a quarter of the room gone on flyering to get people in.
Mm.
But then I also thought I don't want to bother anyone. It's just like I'm just sort of sat with these flyers, and maybe occasionally I'd go and like stand outside my poster on like outside the city cafe where I was performing. I just like stand next to it and just see if anybody noticed that I was on the poster, and then I get chatting to them. But I don't know, I'm so like bothering them, so I feel like going and doing it next year. I'm like, oh, I've got to cut that out because I thought at least even by day 20, I'd be like, shoot, like surely like the quiet last week I must be able to fly people, and I'd just go and like do a couple loops of like the Royal Mile and then just go and sit backstage before I had to go on. So it was yeah competitive, but not when it push comes to shove. Effectively,
So, when you entered stand up, what were the biggest surprises that you encountered from what you initially expected?
uh, I didn't realize there was going to be as many bringer gigs. Really, I think that was hard.
Right.
And it's particularly hard. I think that was a like so many bringer gigs. So for that essentially of obviously bringing a friend along or you won't perform kind of thing. But
Yeah.
more than that, it was when you're on sort of 15, 20 act bills, it's like a whole night. Um, and that I find that really hard. And I was always thinking like, I wonder when you get to the point where you can just sort of turn off and just leave again. That seems really bad. And again, that's maybe my networking thing of just like I just yeah go up and don't speak to anyone and
Mm.
put my bag on and leave.
Yeah.
But then I think that was quite surprising, and I think as well like just the I think like just the sheer amount of people doing comedy really. I think it's like you can do like. Well, I mean, I've already established that I don't do a gig every night, but you could do a gig every night for a month and just have
Yeah.
like, you know, not see the same person twice,
Mm.
or you could do like maybe a couple gigs a month and then see the same bill the whole time. So I think it's just that level of unpredictability of kind of who's out there and stuff. And I think you had a big variety of acts as well. I think there's
Yeah.
just some absolute crackers out there that are just like I've got no idea how they even got into that kind of thing, but it's some of it like, it's just incredible, really. I think as well. Sorry, just like maybe the difference between like maybe like between like music and comedy. Like I
Mm.
feel like you don't get someone like I don't know the Killers or like Arctic Monkeys. You don't get them turning up and doing 5 minutes at like a battle of the bands, you know. And it's like you'll get. I mean, I've not overly gigged with like what I'd call huge comedians, but you get some just turning up like literally like cellar of a wet pub or something in
Yeah.
Kentish Town, and then it's like they'll completely smash it, and it's just like I think it's that level of it's that excitement as well of just thinking, oh, like going to that venue and doing that venue, like that's where so and so's performed. So I think that's
Mm.
that kind of there's a lot of excitement there.
Yeah. Have you so far developed any particular philosophies about the comedy industry, comedy in general, the way you do comedy? Is there anything that you sort of think, going from gig to gig forward, I must always do this or I must never do this, that kind of thing?
I mean, I think just I think if you like turning it on the audience is never good. So I always try not to. I think there's been a few times where maybe like early days if I've just I mean I had one particularly bad gig actually at Wimbledon Park. I think it was Instant Laughs comedy night,
Hmm.
and it's like should be the easiest gig you'll do. It's just people happy to be out having like a I think katsu curry is the dish of the day over there and stuff, and just enjoying it. And I think I went in far too relaxed to the point of I did all of my like I could look around the room and see like kind of maybe middle-aged crowds after a long day. And then for whatever reason, like I did the material that I shouldn't have done that night, and it was just like everything didn't go well. And it was just like I was looking at it like I've gone with this. Like I've seen like I was on like the second half and I was like, I've seen how this was going and I should have known, but it was almost a case of, well, I need to run through this, so I'm gonna do it anyway.
Mm.
And I feel from that, I think it's important to kind of know, like to sort of blend in. I think I know like a lot of people will you'll get someone like a comedian like Tom Stade that'll just go in and just do whatever he wants to do regardless and have like doesn't care who's in the crowd, like they've got to get on board. Whereas I'm sort of like I'll look around and just sort of try and like blend into my surroundings. And I think I've kind of got that now maybe, but that's just from being either myself or seeing other people just sort of going like
Mm.
deep end with like stuff that was never gonna never gonna appeal to people in the crowd. So it's almost like the cringy stuff. But I mean, even then, there's no real formula to it. But I think it's almost trying to make sure that you're not like if it's a primarily older crowd, then you don't really want to kind of start. You don't want to talk about stuff that they're not going to understand, or it's not going to go well. But
Yeah.
yeah.
So, how can we find out about you and where we can come and see you?
So I'm on Instagram and Twitter are my kind of primary things at the Richard Cobb. I think I've got a link to like a link tree, but I can't remember what it is. Because I think it's like link.tree/ the Richard Cobb, but I'm not quite sure. I've tried TikTok, but I find it very hard for anybody to be interested in anything I put on there. And I find myself like Googling like the analytics, how to kind of get viral videos. And then it's just, I think like one that I had was like, that went well. I was overtaking a guy at the marathon dressed as like a blind dog, and that went really well. And that's the one I didn't want to go well because it was like it doesn't paint me in a good light at all. So yeah, I don't really use that as much as it's kind of mainly yeah, Twitter and Instagram, I guess. And then the gigs I'm doing kind of I'm doing Leicester Comedy Fest. I'm doing Couples Massage at Leicester next February,
Mhm.
which is I probably shouldn't be like I know a lot of people try and like they do that whole thing of like, oh, tickets are going really well, but tickets could not be going worse. I think I picked like I think I've done a 7-day capacity, which on reflection is not a good idea. Like I feel like even in Edinburgh, I'd struggle with that. And I've 2 tickets have gone so far as comps to the awards judges. All that's gone in the space of like 2 months. So I'm kind of concerned about that. And I'm doing Glasgow in like March as well, but that's like Easter Sunday. So again, that's something I hadn't thought through. That's, but anyway, live and learn. But yeah, I think yeah, those are kind of the two main ones I've got so far.
And so finally, my last question, Richard, how would you sum up comedy in a nutshell?
Um, I mean, no, because I talk for like it's going to be a pretty big nutshell. It's I don't know. I feel like it's great that like people have a voice and that they can kind of like have a way of expressing themselves that maybe you wouldn't be able to do in your kind of 9 to 5. I think that's been a great outlet in the sense of
Mm.
like people sort of say like, oh, would you do comedy as a career and stuff? But I kind of feel like I always need that kind of outlet of that sort of something fun to do on the side. So whether it had been like kind of music before, and I think then it had been writing,
Mm.
and obviously going and doing stand up. But I kind of feel stand up's it feels like the thing that sort of made the most sense, and it's kind of like the paths have been leading to that. So I'm aware I'm sort of veering off your question, but um, I feel like from that, I think yes, it's great as long as you don't. There's a lot of sort of bad habits in the sense of like I find myself like there's a lot more self-reflection now that I wouldn't have had before, and everyday situations of just walking past a sign, like you're sort of you're always on. It's a bit like kind of if you're going on holiday and you've got data roaming on and it costs you loads of money. It's like that with stand up all the time, that it gets to the point of like complete mundane situations. You're just sort of writing down stuff, and then you look at your notes the next day and think this doesn't even make sense. I think it's very, very active, but I think it's great that you can kind of find sort of joy and humor in everyday situations.
Yeah. Richard, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. It's been great.
Yeah. Cheers, Mark. Thank you.